Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this new webinar from World Languages, which is titled Experiential Learning in the World Language Classroom. It's my pleasure to present the speakers we have for tonight. First, we have Aubrey Schweitzer. Please tell me I pronounce it right.
Aubrey Swisher.
Swisher, apologies. So, Aubrey is an enthusiastic secondary level Spanish teacher. She's also a World Language Department advocate and advisor of Spanish National Honor Society at the Boonesboro High School in Maryland. She's a teacher leader, collaborator, and curriculum writer who demonstrates her passion and admiration for the Spanish language and cultures by creating cultural context for every theme. With 15 years of teaching experience at the secondary level, she teaches levels 1 AP Spanish Language and Culture, in addition to being adjunct faculty at Hagestown Community College. She was recently named the 2023 Maryland World Language Teacher of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And she is also a contributing author and participant in case studies for CLED World Languages, candidate for the secondary representative on the 2024 American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese Board of Directors. Then we have Caroline Schlegel.
Yep, close enough. Caroline Schlegel.
Okay, I'll try better for the next one.
It's all good.
Okay, so Caroline is a master Spanish educator committed to students, professional development, and advocacy. She was named Washington County Public Schools 2021-2022 Teacher of the Year and was also the 2019 Maryland World Language Teacher of the Year. She was awarded Salisbury University's 2013 Mentor Teacher of the Year and also the recipient of the 2016 March and Ball Outstanding Co-Teacher Award. She presents across the nation to build a community of practice to connect and lead teachers through collaboration, and she contracts as Quality Assurance Analyst for the Maryland State Department of Education. She also ensures that the curriculums align with ACTFL standards and core practices. And both of them collaborate in what is called ACquisition with many interesting projects, and they will be present in many conferences as well. So welcome both, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for introducing us. We are so excited to be here as your guests on CLET webinars. And as I was already introduced, I'm Aubrey Swisher, and I'm here alongside my best friend and super colleague, Caroline.
Yes, thank you, Aubrey. I'm Caroline Schlegel, and I am so excited to be here with Aubrey today with CLET and the group of you all joining us live here or in the recording a little bit later as we talk about one of our favorite things to do together, which is implementing experiential learning to foster meaningful language proficiency and cultural understanding.
So as world language teachers, we recognize the importance of equipping our students with a genuine appreciation for cultural diversity and the ability to navigate real life situations. We want to take them out of the classroom and have all of their skills be transferable. So traditional approaches to language education often focus on the tests and the grades, but instead of doing that, we still have to input those grades, but we try to focus more on opportunities for our students. And we believe that shifting our focus to opportunities will let our students actively engage in the real life communication in context with real people across the globe.
Absolutely. And we, given that, right, we have the latitude to create these meaningful language learning experiences that truly resonate and sit with our students and help prepare them for entering this globalized world that we all live in, right? And so this experiential learning that we're going to chat about today, it's this powerful tool, right? It helps us achieve these goals. It helps us foster language proficiency. It helps us develop cultural appreciation and all of the skills that we need to be effective communicators in the world. And I just want to double check that this screen, Aubrey, can you see that? Are we good?
Yes, it looks perfect. So we're going to go on to our plan. So what are we going to see today? As we promised, we're going to make sure you are ready with ideas that you can employ in your own classroom as early as tomorrow. So to do that, we're going to talk you through 3 parts of this presentation, and there will be a plethora of photos and posts from our own classrooms so that you guys can kind of get a glimpse and see what those opportunities and experiences actually look like for our students.
Yeah, everything that we're going to do today, you're going to see is from our actual classrooms, be it from the beginning of this year all the way through the past few years, the things that we've done and that have stuck with us and truly stuck with our students. So we're going to look at understanding the core principles and benefits of experiential learning in the context of world language education. And then we're going to discover these various experiential learning activities, the ones that we're going to show you, and possibly the ones that you can pull from other people who are in this webinar that they might share, and then you can take them to your own classrooms. But you can see that that's going to happen at all levels, in all languages, at different types or with different types of learners, right? And then finally, we're going to design and implement. We're going to show you how to design and implement these experiential learning projects that really foster that language proficiency and cultural appreciation. And we're going to take a look at how we marry project-based learning with experiential learning to create this dynamic classroom environment for our kids.
Okay, so part 1 is I cannot speak today. Experiential learning and its impact on language education. So we'll kind of walk through our why. Why would we have experiential learning? Why do we want to have that have a major role in our own classrooms? And we'll see what some of the research is to back it up.
Absolutely. And sitting at the core, this is something that's really, really important when Aubrey and I are developing lessons together. As was mentioned with Sabrina at the beginning, we work together. Aubrey and I plan things together. We reflect on things together. And something that lies at the heart of what we do are Actful's core practices. They are the fundamental building blocks of our instruction, right? They ensure that we're engaging our students in all 3 modes of communication, the interpretive, the interpersonal, and the presentational mode. And we want them to do that in all 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And so what we love about experiential learning is it puts the students in the driver's seat, and it allows them to hone their skills through their experiences. As teachers, we're designing our lessons with backward design. We're facilitating target language comprehensibility. We're guiding learners. We're never doing something interpretive without leading to interpersonal or presentational, be it through experiential or project-based learning. And so we really, when we're developing these things, these core practices sit and are the fundamental building block for us in experiential learning lesson development. And I just switched like, good. My slides are lagging, so I'm sorry, y'all. So this quote, speaking of experiential learning, right? This is this new method in education. And this quote here comes from the role of experiential learning on student motivation and classroom engagement. And I think I can speak for both me and Aubrey. And when I say that engaging students in these experiences drives learning, right? It increases student motivation and it increases language acquisition. So in the state of Maryland, where Aubrey and I both work, students earn the Maryland Seal of Biliteracy through achieving intermediate high proficiency. And we have students in our classes, and I'm very proud to say this as a world language teacher, who take this test. We actually use Avant assessments tests to gauge our learners, but they are earning the Seal of Biliteracy in level 3. These are students of second language acquisition, second language learning, who are able to earn the Seal of Biliteracy intermediate high, which is what we typically see when our students are exiting at level 5. We have kids who are able to grasp it and really propel their skills forward. And we believe deeply that Actful's core practices and experiential learning yield these positive outcomes for our students. They are able to explore the target language and the target culture, and to explore the target culture through the target language.
I think part of the reason that they excel on those exams is because they're putting the language into real practice. So it's not that they have to just cram and study for a specific test. They feel like they own it. Certain aspects of it they're very familiar with, and knowing the cultural backgrounds as well. It gives them so much insight, not only on Avant, but on that AP exam, which We have students that some of them earn it through the AP exam and Avant. And I just saw recently that you can also be eligible for the Global Seal of Illiteracy if you get a 3 or higher on the AP exam. And we have students that have done that. And it's so exciting to be able to take all of the things that we have done in the classroom and all of their experiences, and that can also translate not just to skills that they're going to have, but also accolades that they can take with them. All right, but here we are. We're talking about when students engage in experiences. This is all of the things that they gain. We probably skipped a few. We pulled this from a great resource, but we wanted to just go through this and really get you on board, right? If they're experiencing, the whole process is meaningful. So every little step that they take is a part of the experience, and that is where they're learning versus just looking at a worksheet or doing an info gap. So if you have this bigger picture and experience that everybody is a part of, they're getting a better understanding of the course material, a broader view of the world, insight into their own skills. I have some students that through experiences that we've had have chosen their majors, opportunities to collaborate with diverse organizations and people. You're going to see all of the different people that we've brought into our classroom, whether it was in person or via Zoom or Google Meets. Positive professional practices and skill sets, and the gratification of assisting in meeting community needs. We do outreach. And lastly, self-confidence and leadership skills. So really the experiential learning, we cannot find anything but a positive outcome from it. And you don't just get one, you get several. So it's very rich. The experience that your student will have, the opportunities, and whenever you have this going on in your classroom, it'll look different for every single class, every single person, but they're going to get something special that they can take away.
Yeah, I have kids come back after years. I've been teaching for 17 years, and I have kids who come back. They're like, Schlegel, do you remember when we did X? I mean, insert any of the projects we're about to tell you about. And it was this exciting moment and this very transformational piece of their learning where they were able to take what they've learned and they've applied it somewhere else outside of school after they've graduated. And that is a very, as a teacher, that's a very gratifying, the reason that we do our job is so that kids take what they learn in our classrooms and apply it to the real world on a daily basis.
Some of them are doing mission trips in Guatemala, helping to build houses, and it's things that we've studied in the room, and they've had many experiences. Some students are going on into interior design, and it's because they explored it in our classroom. So I think it's very interesting. We are world language teachers, but we can do so much with the language and have so many applicable experiences that our students might not have before they exit high school otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we're planning these experiences for our students, it's all about backwards design. What do we want the students to be able to do at the end of this, and how do we want them to experience it to really help push them forward? We want to know, where are they? What do we want them to be able to do? How do we know that they're able to do it? And experiential learning gives us that opportunity to emphasize that learning through actually physically doing things and participating, where really there's no option other than to be actively engaged in the learning. So these are hands-on, direct experiences where they're learning by doing instead of just reading, writing, listening, speaking, right? So
we always like to be able to share and learn from each other, but also from everyone out there. And we want you guys to have something to look at and something that you can be a part of. So we were wondering, what have you provided your students, or what do you plan to provide your students? If you have some ideas that you'd like to share, I think it's on the next slide. You're going to see a QR code. And you can pop ideas in there, and you can also review the ones that are there. We had presented a mini session at Nashville, I believe, is where we have some of these responses from. So you can see we didn't clear it out. We kept it there so that you could see it. And hopefully there's some things that you can take or things that you can enrich a little bit.
Yeah, I just dropped it in the chat just in case. That way, if you want to add to it or grab ideas from people who have shared in this, like Aubrey mentioned, we have done not experiential learning, but the choice sports we presented at Next Fall and Choice Boards, and we shared this same idea of bringing in experiential learning into a choice board. So you'll see ideas from other people, but like Aubrey said, we wanted to leave that there so you too could build from that repertoire that's there. Give you a few minutes to take a look at it. I'm gonna open it too.
See if we're getting any goodies in there.
Yeah, goodies are always good. There's so many great things on there. So we'll continue, but if anything comes to you while you're working or listening to the webinar this afternoon, you can drop it in that document, and then there'll be a space there for you to kind of build ideas as we move forward. All right, so now that we have an idea, oops, excuse me. Now that we have a little bit of an idea of what experiential learning is, it's that hands-on doing piece, we want to share with you these practical experiential learning activities that provide some evidence and some extension and that are real. They're from our classrooms here in Maryland.
Okay, so to open it up with another great quote that will round up, summarize what is experiential learning, why do we love it, why is it in our classrooms? We talked about before that it is participant or learner centric. So instead of you leading, the students really, they are in control. They are experiencing everything for the first time, taking it in different directions, and they're the ones that are doing, discovering, reflecting, and applying. Right? They can't move throughout the entire experience without having to think about what they've already done and where they want to go. So these are skills that aren't only fantastic in the classroom, but they're going to help us in life so that we can think on our feet, we can acclimate to different situations. And this is where students are going to also be able to show off and further develop their communication skills. We're hoping that through these experiences that you see, you can also visualize what kind of language might be going on in your classroom, how you might be able to monitor that or facilitate. And that way you can see not only would your students be thriving in the front seat, but it's a great formative assessment for you. You can take in what they're enjoying, what their interests are, their passions, but also listen to the language that they're using or look at what they're producing so that you can form your next steps. So hands-on, collaborative, reflective learning experiences, they're the things that are going to stay for students or stay with students beyond that moment.
And when Aubrey and I are planning those learning experiences for our students, this cycle that you see here on the screen now, this discover, understand, use cycle, it really does sit at the core of our lesson plan development alongside actual core practices. And so we want students to do it right, discover, understand, and use, right? Regardless of the topic, we focus on language acquisition, period. So we want students to discover and use the language to make these authentic and meaningful connections that then allow them to demonstrate their transfer of knowledge through this practical application, right? So always an authentic resource is sitting at the core. And then we're scaffolding to help students understand whether it's vocabulary or grammar or cultural aspects, that all gets connected through that understand phase. And then finally, we want to use it. And this is not cyclical one way, right? This can go back and forth. And so as Aubrey was saying, you can monitor during experiential learning to figure out, ooh, maybe we need to revisit something here and go backtrack. It's a great formative assessment. So in between each of these, the discover up top with authentic resources, the understand with scaffolded activities, and the use with the apply, integrate, create. These are our extensions, the experiences. You see in between these little arrows, right? And that's our feedback for students and feed forward. We want students to be able to, we want feedback from our students, but we also want students to give each other feedback. And then we want them to use that feedback to push forward and be able to do something with it, right? And so those pieces sit at the core of what we do when we develop these lessons, and practical application and demonstration of skills through experiences brings livelihood to the classroom and to the lesson and to the language and to the culture.
Okay, so super fun. I think I could be a teammate that might drive you a little bit nuts if you're really focusing on a scope and sequence, and I have 1 week to do this, 2 weeks to do this. I'm one of those people that if something's coming up, if it's a real world celebration or event, I want to be a part of it. I want my students to be a part of it. So our first topic is experiential learning, heritage and cultural celebrations, and calendar events. Because if it's going on in the real world, why can't we do it, right? You can take a pause from, learning about, I don't know, do people still learn about the airport, going through the airport, right? That's one thing that we've done classically. But you can pause or you can link it to something else that's going on and get one of those cultural celebrations in there so that when students are talking to their family or friends who are celebrating these same things, they can say, oh my gosh, I know what that is. I know what this practice is, or I recognize that product, or we did this in class. Like, how accurate is this? And they can have conversations and really feel like they're a part of something bigger.
Right. Absolutely. And we are Spanish teachers. So the majority of our ideas, as we said, come from our real life classroom. So you're in luck if you're a Spanish teacher, but right, if you're not a Spanish teacher, you are the expert in your field, in your language, and in the things and the cultural aspects that are important in your classroom and to the target language and culture that you're teaching. So just think about how you can connect what it is that we're talking about with things that you know about your particular language or culture.
And if you want to share in the chat, we're going to keep on going through, but maybe there's somebody else that teaches the same language that you do or the same topic, and that could be a springboard for you guys. So we are not against, dropping some ideas in the chat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we recognize fully that guest speakers are not a novel idea, right? But this this is a great way that we can now, or I guess COVID actually, not to speak of COVID, right? But it opened up this world that I didn't really know truly existed with connecting via Skype was available and some FaceTime started being available. But wow, did how to use video conferencing in my classroom really get shed light on when it was during COVID, right? But prior to that, we recognize that guest speakers, right? Not a novel idea, but we can connect on so many different levels with technology now, right? And these global perspectives can come from people physically coming into your classroom or people physically zooming into your classroom via technology. And so guest speakers give us this ability to bring in these real world experiences and make these meaningful connections. And it allows kids truly, honestly, to see that language exists outside of the four walls in this school building, right? And so I have a couple of examples here. The top left one was a student's parent, right? So I am polling my students. I have students from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds, and how rich and powerful to bring in their experiences from their world that they live in every day and share that with others and create those meaningful connections with those families and communities that we have around us. And the other one, my neighbor, Eric, who happens to speak Spanish, I was like, hey, I think it'd be a great idea if you would talk to my kids about how important it is to be bilingual in a global market, because he works in marketing, digital marketing. And so he came in, he chatted with my kids, he advocated for study abroad, he advocated for the scholarships that you can get to connect to traveling abroad, because we recognize that not all students have the means to do that, but there are opportunities available. And so he spoke deeply and passionately about the importance of language and culture and the connection that that can give you as you move into the business world. Guest speakers are one of my favorite opportunities for kids because it is someone else in the room vouching for the thing that I love so passionately, and they get to see someone else doing it, right? And I know Aubrey has a ton of experience with guest speakers in her classroom as well.
Well, I feel like once you open the door and your students have the experience and they get past those initial nerves, I think they also see the value in it. So I will start with my top left picture because that one floored me last year. And it's another thing I think it's wonderful to be a flexible teacher because it was late afternoon and I had a student that had just transferred to our county and she had come from Peru. And she had been in my class for a few weeks. Something happened and she was out, and then she returned. And by the time she returned, we were fully engrossed in all of these cultural conversations. We were exploring Peru, and she's like, oh my gosh, so excited. I'm from Peru. And she asked, what other things would I want to know? What do I not want to know? I want to know all the things. If you want to speak to us, if you want to have somebody else talk to us, please share all of your experiences. And she said, okay, well, I'd really like to tell you guys about the school system because I know that we're doing a lot of cultural comparisons. And she did that. And she said, I think I'll have somebody else come in. If I can give them like a Zoom link, we can talk to somebody else. I'll have a guest come. I said, okay, thanks. She came in the next morning. It was the mayor. No big deal. We were like, what? So it was it was fantastic. We thought it was just going to be a friend. And she's like, here we go, and telling us, she introduced us to the mayor, and my students were like, wait, the mayor, like, this feels like a big deal. They were a little bit nervous at first, but they did wonderfully. And he answered any question that we had. He could talk about the demographics. He could talk about the geography, the effects of history on the economy, and all of the things that we didn't know, but we wanted to. And I just thought that was amazing that I had a student that saw how much I had wanted to connect with people, and she made that connection happen. Other things that we've done, you're going to see Happy World Foundation. Caroline's going to introduce that in the next slide. But that is a way that you can also make some meaningful relationships. And I think like 2 years ago, I had connected with a specific woman who was very nice, very young. She was still in school. And now she was studying at the university. And we had just kept in touch a little bit. And I told her my students were learning all about Argentina. They love soccer. Somebody kept having questions about yerba mate. They wanted to make it, but they wanted it to be right, create this authentic experience. And we were also studying about al asado, which, if you know about Argentinian meats and kind of barbecuing, grilling out, it's such a rich experience. Very funny that our guest speaker was a vegetarian, but she's like, I've got to. I might not eat all of the meat, but I can tell you all the things. And so she did that, and she talked to us about soccer and told us about Messi. And then she was like, oh, wait, didn't somebody have questions about yerba mate? And she prepared it in front of us. And so we got a real-time presentation from an authentic speaker from that target culture, showing us how to do one of the practices and describing what one of the products that my students was curious about. So that's just beautiful. Another thing that you can see on here, I have some colleagues that have Hispanic heritage, and they came in and they talked to us and showed us how to cook different dishes or describe different holidays. And that was also a really cool connection because I didn't have to go outside my building. We brought people straight into the classroom. Some students had not realized that their other teachers or secretaries or guidance counselors had the same Hispanic heritage as they did. And it was just a really nice experience. And then lastly, a real world connection. Miriam, I'll never forget. She is a tour director that I met 10 years ago. She took my students on a mini tour through photos and through video and talking to us. And she also has the great experience of working at an airport. And so she also showed us some really funny pictures and told us some funny stories about things that could occur and what you actually need to know to navigate. So just any connection that you can make. Caroline has her friends and her neighbors coming in. She's connecting with people on Happy World. Go ahead and go over there, Caroline, because I'll keep going. I'm so excited. Caroline, go over to that one.
Yeah, right. So
it is so fun.
Talking about leveraging the power of connections within our classroom and our community and the people that we know, but not all of us maybe have that opportunity, and now you do, right? Akash Patel, who is currently the president of ACTFL, he was speaking as a keynote, I think it was back honestly in like 2018 when I was attending the Foreign Language Association of Virginia, FLAVA's conference, when I was presenting there, and he happened to be the keynote. And I sat in the keynote and I was like, oh my gosh, he was explaining Happy World Foundation, that it was named after his brother that he tragically lost in an airplane accident, and that he just wanted to connect the world to foster this global citizenship and develop these wonderful humans in our classrooms that promote global citizenship around the world, right? And so he was like, how can I do this? He started this opportunity. He was teaching Spanish in Oklahoma, Um, and he began connecting in his travels with people who volunteered to be speakers in classrooms. And so through Happy World Foundation, all you have to do is contact Happy World Foundation, Akash Patel, either on Twitter or on Facebook. You can head over, and I'll look for the link to their website and drop it in the chat. But it is as easy as a simple connection with Akash, and he will provide you with a speaker of whatever language it is that you're teaching in a global space that your students can communicate with directly. And it is truly, it's for free. The foundation is unbelievably eye-opening when in terms of like Aubrey connected with a person who's teaching her kids how to create mate. You know, I am connecting with people who are in Mexico showing us how to create our own tortillas. Like, it is just absolutely fascinating that this is all offered to us for free. So if you are not using Happy World Foundation to bring the world to your classroom, it is truly one of the most exciting experiences for your kids to use the target language and have someone who speaks that language understand them, respond to them, and then share information back with them that they're then computing and then able to converse. It's the most natural interpersonal conversation you could ever bring into your classroom. It's really all for free, like mind blowing. Teachers are always here for free, right? So like, this is great. This is great. And this particular instance, my tweet, Celia Zamora, who is the director of professional learning for Actful, she wanted to get in on this, right? And so she zoomed in with my classes, and it was a great experience for both my students and for her. And Aubrey has just as much experience with Happy World Foundation as well.
So in case Caroline was talking and you're like, oh, this sounds really great, it sounds maybe fun, but maybe a little intimidating, that's where I was at the beginning. So she had met Akash, right? She saw him as the keynote speaker, and she went ahead with it, and then she told me about it. So she was the first person that I knew that had tried Happy World Foundation, and I wanted to give it a go in my class, and I had, dropped a few lines to some of my students, and they're like, wait, again, this was around COVID whenever I first did it. It was 2020. Like, we're going to talk to a stranger, a little bit timid. So I came up with this activity, and we based it for Hispanic Heritage Month is whenever we were launching it. But I had my students all break up, and they kind of investigated, researched one of the Spanish-speaking countries. And they filled in a chart with some simple information. And then afterwards, I was like, okay, so what do you think? If you were going to try to find out where somebody was from or what was important to them about their culture, what kind of questions do you think would reveal that kind of information? And they collaborated on some questions. And the last thing was go back, and if you chose Ecuador to investigate, I want you to read those questions and figure out what those answers would be for somebody from Ecuador. And they did it. They had a great time. Okay, we're ready. We did the Happy World Foundation, and one of the fun things is you can ask to talk about a specific topic, or you can ask to have a mystery guest. So think about your lower level students too. They're practicing having questions and exchanging personal information. Each student was able to ask 2 questions to our guest, and then we had to figure out where we thought they were from. In 6 classes, 5 classes got it right on the first guess, and then we got it right on the second guess for the 6th class. But the students felt so excited and so intrigued and so empowered. Not only were they having the conversation where they had to ask the question, everybody was focusing on understanding the answer, whether it was their question or not, because they were racing to look through their resources and figure out, where's this person from? We wanted to get it right. So that's just one of the other fun ways that you can use Happy World Foundation. It can be a little bit less intimidating. You can kind of gamify it a bit. And if you see the tweets on the page, it went so well that then my next door neighbor was like, okay, I'm ready. I've heard your students talk about it. It sounded fun. So Caroline and I both would really advocate for that experience. We think it's wonderful.
I threw the link in the chat to the teacher how-to that has a link to Happy World and how to get into connection with Akash and all of that, just so that people have access to that. If you're curious, it truly is a wonderful resource.
And we can share this same activity with you guys as well at the end.
go back here. All right, so moving on, right? So guest speakers, right? Sometimes we have guest speakers make food for us, and sometimes we need our kids to make food themselves, right? So food is not rational. Food is culture, it's habit, it's craving, it's identity. You learn a lot about countries through food, right? It's not about just eating, okay? Why are these ingredients necessary? What are the key ingredients in those target areas? What can those ingredients tell us about the history of a country, the geography of a country, the climate of a country, the economy of a country, and how can we compare what's going on in that country, right, with our own local delicacies, right? How can we make those connections with what we're studying? And so through the preparation of food, students learn to use ingredients that they may otherwise not know, right? I had a kid who went to an international market for the first time 2 weeks ago, and it was eye-opening for them because they could not find the ingredients in their, you know, local grocery store. They had to go somewhere specific. And so that was a really big piece. So get kids in your classroom, cooking, preparing, cross-curricular. If you've still got a class where there's a kitchen, head down there and make something together. Bring in somebody and have them make it. But use those experiences in your classroom and leverage whatever resources you have.
You can do this at any time with the food. There's multiple ways to pull food into your curriculum. I think it pops up. We've seen where you study in Spanish 1, right? The foods, or you're going to a restaurant. But then whenever you get to the culture and you're talking about the identity, all the things that Caroline mentioned, you can bring food back into it. And Hispanic Heritage Month is also a really fun way to do it. We have a choice board that we make for our students. So there's no pressure. You don't have to feel like you have to do a food. There are experiences beyond food as well. But you can see some pictures. Lots of my students do choose to do the food, but other options for their experiences that they could share with our peers were music and dance, or we played like a Venezuelan card game. We did a game that was centered around numbers and grouping. It's played in Ecuador and it's for children. And one of my students, JJ Berg, was like, you know, I really want to do this. I think it'll be funny. And I know that that's the thing that we always struggle with. For some reason, we can talk about complex things, but some of the numbers just go out the window. So we put our life skills kids into, and we played these games with them. And it was just such a great experience. So if you think about the things that make culture and how you can bring those in almost every language, right? I think there's a celebration here in the United States as well to celebrate that heritage. So just keep your wheels turning and think about the things that you can do or that your students can do. In the past, you can see in the top right, Caroline and I made boards, choice boards for the students. This year, I had some students I had in the past, and I was like, it is your turn. So they came up with all the things that they wanted to present and they wanted to do. He said, you're going to make the experiences for yourself and your peers. And they have been doing this every Friday throughout Hispanic Heritage Month. We have about 4 to 5 students per class that will come in and they'll teach us how to do a craft, or they'll prepare a food at home, or if it's simple like guacamole. Today we made guacamole and we had that with chips. But there's so many things that you can do. And again, just take a pause and celebrate. Talking about celebrating Dia de los Muertos, there are so many students that are intrigued by what Dia de los Muertos is. Calaveras are popping up everywhere. So I already love the holiday and the celebration, but when you have students coming in and they're intrigued or they're asking, what does this mean? Oh, it opens the door to do even more. So I got to get all of my Spanish teachers on board to help me with this. And we looked at the monarchs as well and their arrival to Mexico that coincides with the arrival of Dia de los Muertos and what the perspectives and the beliefs with that were. So we started by decorating the halls with all of the butterflies, and they each wrote on the wings the name of somebody's spirit that they were hoping would find us back home, that we would be thinking about and celebrating on Dia de los Muertos. But that led us back into the classroom. And we wanted to do the whole practice as much as we could. So this is just an example to show you how you can take a source, right? Originally, I was just looking for an authentic resource to teach students about one of the cultural practices of building an ofrenda. But what is more meaningful? Learning about how to build an ofrenda, doing it on paper, or just filling the blanks or answering questions, or actually doing it. So I found this infographic that had the very nice visuals to help support the language, so that we were able to use it in all of the languages, and not all the languages, all the levels. But we built a class ofrenda, and every level contributed, and every day they knew what was happening. What goes on the ofrenda? Why is it there? What does it signify? And what's coming next? So again, you can find a source, and instead of keeping it as a simple task or activity, you can stretch it and build it into an experience that students are going to remember. They are talking about it to their families, and it's something that some, will never let go.
Sorry, I am like happy clicking over here. My bad.
Another thing that we do is las parrandas. It is a Puerto Rican practice. So this is something that we can also share with the middle school, the elementary school, and go throughout the halls and bring all the cheer here. And it's something that the students, they have heard about. If they weren't in my class yet, they know it's coming. They are either going to be one of the parranderos, or they are going to experience las parrandas. So this is a way that you can get your school involved as well, and it's super fun. I like to send an email to the staff and also to the parents, so everybody knows what we're learning about, what it means, what it looks like. And then we learn some of the traditional songs, and we go and we go and surprise, some homes or classes, and we have our mini fiestas in there, and we sing, and we pick up some more kids and go to a next class. So again, this is something that's really exciting. And then you have some students that may have come from Puerto Rico, or they have siblings that are still in Puerto Rico. That was the case for me. And they're like, oh my gosh, like my aunt just sent me a video from parrandas. And then they're pulling up other things like, look at this parranda that they had. Everybody's singing the same song that we did. Look at, they're in Walmart, and they're showing me all the things. But for the students to have that experience, an authentic learning experience that they can relate to people from the target culture, or others that are heritage speakers, and they still have these practices that they're doing in local communities, it's so exciting.
This one was for Dia de Amor y Amistad, right? So we're always AP minded in all that we do. And we're thinking about the free response questions on that AP exam. It's important to scaffold those skills starting in level 1, right? We all know that AP just doesn't happen in level 5. You got to start when they're in level 1. And we want to make sure that we're focusing on how to build those skills starting early. And so this was an experiential learning lesson, right? That started on focusing on how holidays are a representation of values in our society. So it's not that we're not just doing these things, right? There's a bigger reason for us bringing these exciting experiential pieces into our classroom. We want them to truly understand the purpose of why we celebrate, how that makes us who we are, what that says about our society, right? And so the first thing we had kids do is look at an authentic resource. We wanted kids to think about our culture and think about the culture in the resources that we presented, whether they were readings or listenings or songs, whatever they were. Then, of course, we learned in, I believe it is Colombia, they do amigos secretos with little boxes, kind of like when we were younger. So this was a great comparison for kids, right? But kind of like when we were younger, we would make these little boxes in school, and we would load them up with all the Valentine's Day things, right? Well, my kids and Aubrey's kids, they made those boxes in class, and they wrote each other notes in the target language, notes of support, notes of kindness, notes of things that people do well, right? And we slipped those little notes in those little boxes, and we spread joy. We made Valentine's Day a little bit sweeter. We made this lesson just a little bit sweeter by including them in the experience of the lesson. And then they were able to answer this question at the end more thoroughly, right? How our holidays a representation of our values as a society, right? And they thought about really genuinely what they were doing and how it made them feel and what it says about who we are, because they got to just experience that moment and apply it to their answer. And this was a presentational writing piece.
The cultural comparisons are always so exciting because whenever you come to that realization that like, oh my gosh, we actually have a lot in common, that's exciting. But also whenever you have a new perspective, you're like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. That's really cool or intriguing or different. Doing these types of experiences, that's what's going to remain with kids and let them view people and places in a different way that maybe they wouldn't have before. La Pascua, we were talking about being AP minded, right? Doing all these AP things. Oh, this takes me back to my AP class. La Pascua, oh, it comes up in spring. We're talking about Easter and what else is coming up but the AP exam. So this is when the kids are like, and I want all the practice. So I found this article and I needed my kids to have some extra practice with AP-like questions, and I wanted them to also do it with an audio. I got this turned into audios using Parakeet, but that's another presentation. And then I'm like, let's do the whole thing. So they learned about it. We're assessing, what are you taking from this? Go ahead and press a click, Caroline. We need to
you got it.
Okay, so first they learned about it through the article and the multiple choice. They're intrigued, right? Their interest level is high. And like, wait a minute, if I'm understanding this correctly, is this an egg? I'm like, well, yes, it is. Like, what? Wait a minute. And some of them are laughing. They're like, I don't know if I got this right. I don't know if I understood it. So I'm like, well, let's find out if you did. And so then we got to go and explore another article, como hacer cascarrones. So they learned how to make them, but we weren't going to stop there. Like, let's do it. Now you know how to make it, why they're made, when they're used. Go ahead and click again. And it was the best experience ever. So they did all of the rigorous learning. They did all those activities, and it was very backwards for them. Before they had made it, they had to learn about it and listen. I did want it to be an AP task for them, right? So you never know what's going to show up. They didn't know what was showing up that day, and I wanted to see what they could take from it. So they put down what they thought they heard, what their interpretation was. We followed it up to clarify, yes, and then we said, let's do it. And so then they went through the steps and they actually made the cascarrones filled with confetti, and they got to engage in a really fun cultural practice. And my room was covered with eggshells and confetti and laughter as they broke them over each other's heads and wished each other buena suerte. But again, that was something that they're not going to forget. It was aligned with curriculum. It was AP practice, but we took it a step further and really brought a lot of joy into the classroom.
Y'all, where does the time go? Holy crap. I just looked at the, I'm like, this is the last holiday celebration we'll share real quick. This is Earth Day, Dia de la Madre Tierra. And so my kids studied biomes. We studied the impact of our choices. We studied pollution. We studied, and this is all under the thematic piece or the theme, the AP theme, global challenges, right? And so we're discussing all of this stuff, but we took to our campus. And we worked in small groups to clean up all of our campus and the materials that we found along the way. We charted them. So you can see on the bottom right-hand corner there, they've got madera, tela, metal, vidrio, whatever it was, and they're marking it. It is no surprise that plastic was the most common thing that we found, right? And then we studied mar de plástico and all of that stuff afterwards. But students actually going outside, and we can learn about pollution all day long, but until you go out and see what is actually sitting on your own campus, that if you look out the window, it looks pretty clean. And then you go out and you're like, it's actually not at all. It was astounding. We had bags and bags and bags of trash. And not just one class did this, multiple classes did this, and multiple classes had bags and bags of trash. But that moment served as an opportunity for students to collect data that they could use to support the creation of an infographic to share about pollution and what we need to do as a community. to rectify that situation or to be more mindful of what our impact is on our local environment. We actually sent those infographics home. We made them bilingual and we sent them home in our weekly newsletter. In April, so that we were able to share with others in our school community and have an audience for what we were creating. But also it used data from our school. So the kids included pictures, the kids included the data that they collected, and they were able to share that. When kids know that they are going to use the information or people are going to see it, it is much more powerful. And consequently, they were more invested in the creation of their infographics because they knew where they were going to spread awareness to people, right? Not just share it with me so I could grade it. And that was
purposeful instead of pretend.
Correct. It was purposeful instead of pretend. I love that, right? So we are jumping in, Aubrey, to
Topic 2, AP correlations and curricular connections. So if you weren't all about stopping and pausing for the holidays, that's okay. We can still pull things in the other way. We'll get you celebrated by your principal for looking at cross-curricular connections. Meanwhile, your supervisor will celebrate all of your AP connections.
Yes, right. So here we go. We're going to start with number 1. This was a thing that my AP students did, and this was cross-curricular lesson planning. And it truly, honestly, cross-curricular lesson planning is critical to ensuring that students truly see the importance of language and culture outside of our 4 walls in our classroom. That as world language teachers, truly, we have the best job. We can connect to literally any other content areas pretty seamlessly. So as we move through this little lesson I'm going to share with you guys, we were leveraging the expertise of our colleagues to create these meaningful experiences. And we were looking at the theme of beauty and aesthetics through art and also science and technology here. And we are looking at machinism and how it changes local artisan communities and the impact that it has on education. And so I took my kids, I co-planned with our shop teacher. We went down to the shop class, right? If you have a 3D printer in your school, if you have a laser printer in your school, if you have something that can cut anything in your school, you can do papel picado, it can cut through paper. This one cuts through metals. So we have both here. But if you take them down to the shop and let them look at how quickly machines just pump things out, right? So I took them down after reviewing a bunch of authentic resources on the impact of machines on local artisans and local artisan communities and what that does for people's livelihood and the economy. And, they were like, oh, machines make things so much easier. It's so much quicker. It's so much better. You can make more money. You can make more money. And then we went down and we saw just how crazy fast, right? It takes, you program it and it happens, and it doesn't really take any skill. So then they started to think like, well, man, these people actually honed a skill. Like they have worked so hard. This is a part of their community. Like they make these specific things for their specific communities. It's a part of their culture. And now we just have machines pumping them out. Wait a second, right? But they were able to physically see this machine, and I'll play this. It might be a little loud, but you can see our laser cutter downstairs. I don't know if the video is super high quality, but you can see the laser cutter. It is just cutting out this metal so quickly and it's done, right? And so the students then decorated them because we were in October when we did this lesson. But then when it came time for our students to discuss the impact that technology has, right, on local artisans and local communities, they had that real authentic experience of being down there, seeing how quickly something can be made and how it affects the livelihood of others when technology comes in and takes that place. And we looked at 3 resources, but they had that authentic experience, and their essays blew me away by the amount they included that real life experience and how it changed their opinion on the impact of technology on art. So connect with your shop teachers, y'all.
Shop teachers, art teachers, media specialists. As Caroline had mentioned, she had used the shop, and I didn't have something like that available to me. But in the past, I had partnered with the art teacher who taught us how to do paper mache to make calaveras that way. And then last year, inspired by Caroline, I was like, okay, let's see if we can give it a spin. I had a lot of students from the last year that had already done the paper mache. What can we do and how can we really compare this? And we did the 3D printer with the media specialist. And it was also a very great experience where the students could really take both years and not just think about, you know, what other people are making, but their experience of what did it feel like whenever you made this calavera versus this one. Does one of them look more perfect? Does it have the same amount of sentiment in it? And it was really cool to see their debate about, you know, if this movement was a positive or a negative for society as a whole. So very cool conversations that you can have. A conversation that I was not having very well in my classroom was the role of literature in culture and in art. And my students were like, we don't read. Sorry, Senor Swisher, I cannot name these books. Like, oh my goodness, how I want to talk about this. I think it's really important, but I need to have a segue to get the students on board. And so I started to explore banned books and also freedom of expression. And there's lots of movements in the United States where you see that certain books are banned or they're difficult to get in schools, or certain groups are in uproars about certain publications. So I decided we could go that route and explore and see, what is a banned book? What is freedom of expression? Do these things go together, or how can they exist in the same culture? And have you ever read a banned book? And the students are like, probably not. And we started to talk about all the different titles and maybe why they were. And we even got to have the students have an experience, right, of watching Hair Love. That was something that I had put in purposefully beforehand. We were talking about how you're exposed to literature and how you first read and how you pick genres and things like that. And so when kids were talking about their favorite stories, I said this was one of my favorite ones. And you can read it to your students, or you can show them the short. And the students watched it, and we talked about the themes of identity in there and what was important to the girl and the dad and their relationship. And they thought it was beautiful. And then we found out that it was also on a list of banned books, but they only found that out through listening to an authentic resource. So again, they had to listen, they had to understand, and they're like, what? Finally, I had passion about literature in my classroom because all of that, those students had that shared experience together. So that's one of the beauties too of experiential learning. There's no student that is ahead of another. They're on a level playing field. They're all in it together. They know what everybody has seen or heard on this topic, and that you can really build something beautiful from that. So that was exciting. It went from crickets to so much passion and what is this, and exploring things outside of the classroom and sharing with friends.
Yeah, literature is such a great topic, but it's definitely one of those topics, I agree with you, that doesn't always. Yeah, they don't love it. They're like, speaking of literature and connecting with our media specialists, a really great way to do this, if you haven't, is what is called book tasting. And I will admit that I had no idea what book tasting was. It sounds a little crazy, and I'm sure you might have that question too. But I happened to walk into the media center one day, and there was an English class in there, and they were doing this book tasting. And our specialist had like little tablecloths and little centerpieces and some music playing, and they had some snacks. So it was like they were speed dating these novels on tables, right? In this like ambiance restaurant romantic setting where they're trying to get to know these books. And I'm like, I got to do this. This is something that I need to do. So I'm like, all right, how can we do this? What can we do? I'm like, oh my goodness, authors of Hispanic or Latino origin. This is exactly what we're doing. So, after weeks of researching and co-planning with the media specialist, she brought in books from all over our county, not just the ones we had in our library, but books from all over our county. So the students had a great selection of books that they could choose from. And we put a bunch of different books on tables, and students had this little lonche de libros, like appetizer, principal plate, like the dessert, and then something to take home. So they had to taste 4 different books, tell me who the author was, talk about the genre of the book, grade it, like, do they like it? Would they give it 4 stars? And then tell us a little bit about what the book was about, right? So that's just this, like, brief overview. And you can see my kids sitting here in the media center, our media specialist explaining the resources that they were using. And my kids are like doing their little book tasting, right? And they're filling out this paper. Then they had to choose one and make a poster. Now, this is during Hispanic Heritage Month, right? So we did these in English. I will say, like, 90% target language, 10% reserve it for what you want. This is my 10% because this is meaningful to our entire school. These books were put on showcase in our media center with these book flyers that my students created while they were doing their Lonche de Libros that are from authors of Latin American or Hispanic origin. And you can see they look great. They felt compelled to do a wonderful job because they knew these were going on display. And so we did that piece, right? And then I'm reserving the other part of my 10%. My lead teacher put up a bulletin board, and the kids were like, we should take the hooks from the first of the book and add them to that board that's outside, right? And so my kids took the first line, the hook of their book, and put it in English and Spanish, and we added it to this little piece that you see here to kind of elevate the voices of Latin American authors in our school. After they did all of that stuff, right, they've had this book tasting experience and they've contributed to meaningful and important information being shared in our school. We looked at connecting with the International Latino Book Awards, which is from an Empowering Latino Futures, which was formerly Latino Literacy. Now it's a 503 or 501c3. It's a nonprofit out of California. And they do awards every year for authors of Latin American and Hispanic descent. And so my kids had to look at a former program, right? And one of the books that they chose from their book tasting, they had to imagine, this was their imaginative piece, so this is the project-based piece, that their author won that award. And they had to prepare the speech that they were giving pre the author coming up and accepting the award. And so they did a quick introduction. And then we had people come in from school to listen to the awards that we were giving. Okay, so I had administrators, I had my principals, I had some of my other my Spanish teachers. We had people actually sitting in as we were presenting these books for the awards that they were nominated for and were receiving. And so anything that you can do to put your kids in front of an audience, anything that you can do to allow your kids to experience, that's really where language learning comes to life. And then we went to Planet Word in DC. And if you've never been to Planet Word in Washington, DC, or you're not near it, right, they do virtual tours. So you can set up virtual field trips with Planet Word, and they have actual things that are actual people that will lead these things. I'm going to copy the link and I'm going to put it in the chat to everyone right now. Planet Word is this amazing place where it's an immersive language experience, right? Students had a blast as they explored. There's a living library. There's talking about the power of words, the power of protest, the meaning of words, the etymology of words, languages. It teaches kids how to say things in so many different places across the world. And so this was a really cool experience as a capstone for what we were studying with regard to literature. So take your kids on field trips. It's a lot of work, but it's totally worth it.
And that book project was so fun. And that's something that's very impactful. As Caroline was saying, she was having other people come in and watch the speeches, but also that the students' work is displayed. I also had my students share some of theirs on the morning announcements. And it's just so cool. We had a group of EL students that didn't realize that we had so many books in Spanish in our library. And because we were so excited about it and so passionate about it, my group of students and I, as we were doing this project, the librarian then also came and visited me and said, hey, I'm going to put an order in for more books. But, I really enjoyed when your kids came in, and then to see some of the students, that don't have much English yet, and they still need an escape. They still need to be with their first language and be able to read and enjoy art through that way. I'd love to have more things in my library for you guys and for them. And so I got to sit down and explore books. And send out some tweets and things like that and ask for recommendations. And that's really cool. That's something that started out as an experience in our classroom, kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger to have a greater impact on our entire school community. All right. I don't know if we should just like skip some things
a couple of these, yeah.
Or
yeah, we can do that. I mean, we can touch on it. We can like very briefly say what they are, right?
Very brief. Okay,
yeah.
La
I don't even know. Do we even know how to be brief, Aubrey? I don't think we do.
Yeah, I don't know. That's sort of like, do we skip because we get wrapped up and we're like, oh my gosh, and that was so much fun. But I'll try to make it really short. I will just barely even look at the photos. But we had La Fogata students were learning about open air activities and things that they could do outdoors in our culture. How is nature or green spaces, how are they valued in other cultures? And some things that we saw were like al asado or creating la fogata, whether it was here or there. And so our students, we still wanted them to have practice using 3 different source types, again, AP aligned. So we wanted to have an infographic and make sure that students could understand that. We wanted to have an article where students would have to look for more details, and then also to have an audio where students were only relying on what they could hear, using their prior knowledge and their skills and strategies to make meaning out of everything that was coming at them. So they would be familiar with different parts of it, but other things would be new. We had students fill out these charts and do some comparisons with other peers, see what they got. They went through stations, but ultimately we're going to get to where you can see our students are outside, and we have not told them a darn thing about making a bonfire in English. Nothing. Most of them don't even have experience doing that. And we're like, we want you to show us that what you learned is meaningful. So what you learned in Spanish class, you should be able to do out in the world. Go make a bonfire. We didn't let them light it, but they were like,
there was no fire at school.
They're like, we're going to make a bonfire. I mean, if you want to, or on a rainy day, you can use different materials and have them represent things. But I am lucky enough to have a little wetlands area, almost like a little park, right between my campus and the middle school. So I'm like, well, no, we're going to go out. Like, what do you need to find? And they're telling me what they need. I'm like, where could we find that? So take your kids outside. And then they built it from scratch, but they were using the vocabulary because they had to give us a step-by-step video clip about how to build a safe fogata. And they had to do it from scratch, starting from the beginning, and also put it out. Again, we had no flame. That was the only part that we had to use our imagination for. But students felt like they could do this, and it was really exciting to see them using their skills that they had acquired, the knowledge that they had acquired in the second language, to do something that, you know, maybe they're going to have the best parties ever now on the weekend. I don't know.
Best parties ever. Oh, come on, slides.
Because of Spanish class, because of their world.
Because of Spanish class, they're having the best parties ever. So this one's really quick. This is a grammar activity, right? So that was a quick view. We're looking at injuries, right? And so we partnered with, again, of course, grammar and context. My students are understanding how to say, mi rodilla está hinchada, right? So they're using past participles as adjectives here. And we are figuring out how to do that. And we're doing that in context. And we have an interactive little grammar lesson there. And then they're recognizing patterns. So a little bit, if you're familiar with the PACE model, we're kind of doing that here, right? And as the end of the unit comes together, right, let's experience it, right? Have you ever worked with your biology teacher, your anatomy teacher, your nurse, anybody who knows how to mix things, your drama, drama, create fake wounds, right? Then have students describe the injury. How did it happen? Give all the details. Pull in your school nurse if they're bilingual. Have them talk to your school nurse. Have them share what happened, and then she can share remedies, and then they can go from there. So just a really cool way to bring in a little bit more, but then have students experience. And then they have this really cool wound show. And who has the worst story for wounds? Preterite and imperfect. Who has the worst story with their wounds? Excellent.
So we were talking about with that one, like how fun it could be. You can have that experience making those things. Maybe somebody's going to go into theater, but it started in your room. But
Right.
also maybe you're going to go into the medical field. And if you have them do a communicative activity where they have to make sure that they prep and make their wound, right? Whatever wound they have to come up with a story, how it happened, what the problem is. You can have a nurse. It's almost like playing telephone. Somebody comes and they have to interview the student with the wound. They have to listen and take down notes and pass that clipboard then to a third party. And they're going to read these clipboards, and looking at the descriptions, they're going to have to figure out which patient they're assigned to. Who do they have to find? So it's just another way, like you can have so many experiences, but make it super fun. And your students are still really being tested with their listening and their speaking and their writing and reading skills.
And gross, right? We can skip over this one. I'll put a link in a chat to this. We'll very briefly just say we worked with code.org. If you've never worked with code.org before, it's coding in the world language classroom. And I know that coding typically has a pretty bad rap when it comes to the debate that we always have about keeping coding and world language separate. But code.org actually speaks up and says, no, actually they are separate, right? So code.org is on our side when it comes to keeping those two very important courses of study separate, but that they can work together to create powerful learning experiences. So we worked with code.org. Actually, we created the lesson, and then code.org asked us to feature it because they loved it so much. But we brought Jay Balvin's Mi Gente into our classroom. We looked at technology over time and how technology has revolutionized music. And we had students up, they were dancing, they were singing, they were creating, and then they were coding using code.org. And so I'll just share this video real quick. No, I won't. You can watch it. Yeah, you can watch it when the slides come out with the presentation. But look at code.org because there are a plethora of activities. And one thing I do want to mention, there are so many languages that are available on code.org. So guaranteed that every language on this call is represented on code.org, which also provides equitable access to our EL students. So if you have people in your buildings who are looking for ways to connect with computing or coding, please let them know that code.org has so many resources for multilingual people.
Okay, I'm going to fly through these last ones for real, I promise, because I think they're pretty self-explanatory as well. So if you're doing anything where students are supposed to be exploring another place or talking about their own city, there are different sites that you can use that are going to help bring things to life and make it so that students can actually feel like they're there. So virtual vacation is one of them, so you can check that out. Again, you'll have access to these slides and the whole webinar, so you can go back through and see what there is to offer there. But if you go forward, Caroline, we'll keep on going.
Yes, I can do that.
There's also something that's called Drive and Listen, which is really cool. And you can have your students, if you're ever doing directions, right? Or you want to see what a certain place looks like, you can use it either way. You can get in a car, you can listen to the radio or have the radio off, but you can get the experience of driving through Barcelona or wherever you want to be on the map. Okay, there are not every location, not maybe everywhere you want to be, but pick one and you can find things to say or talk about to narrate what's happening. What do you see? That can be a great way to look at the city, or you can be what is it called? In the GPS. I don't know whose voice it is anymore. Or
the
on
voice.
Waze.
It could be anybody.
The voice was speaking. I didn't know. Alexa, Siri. I don't know if Waze has a name too, but the little voice comes out, right? That little friend. So we can say, that's it. That's you. And they can be driving and they can try to keep up with it. It's really hysterical. They're telling you when you have to stop or like take a right, but they have to watch it in real time. And then they get the experience. It feels like they're driving and they're in a place that they've been learning about. They can see what the actual people look like. They can appreciate the architecture. It's just something to make it a little bit more fun and lively in your classroom. And then entertainment. Shows and movies, again, those are great ways to have shared experiences with your students. I try to just drop in a whole bunch of ideas. At the top are some series that I'm using with my classes, and then most of the bottom then are going to be full-length films that you can show portions of, or you can turn it into an entire unit. But these are things that can really enrich your class, whether it's something that you want to turn into a routine, you want to do a portion every Monday to start off the week, or if it's something that's going to be a culminating experience or an opener to a unit. These are great things that can provide students with a cultural. Oh, we went to Celia with a no, go back, it's fine. They'll get to see the target cultures, they'll hear the language, and again, they have so many things to talk about. This is a great slide to have up here. It doesn't have to be a lot of prep for the teacher. You could have already taught through all the different themes, and this is just something that's going to reinforce your conversations, your learning. Here you can see it was as simple as we were watching an episode of Celia, and we had all of these different themes that we found to be present, and we wanted to see if the students could pick up how they could interpret that. What was present to talk about identity or family or values or racism or government, culture, what was present there? And then you can have those rich conversations. Again, everybody's on the even playing field, and they feel so accomplished that they were able to actually watch a film or a series in the target language and then have those conversations afterwards. So it's really empowering, and again, might inspire your students to take your language outside of the classroom and enjoy other components of culture outside of their class period. Boom, boom, boom. All right, we're on part 3.
We can do this pretty quickly too. So you want to go ahead, Aubrey?
Yeah, just we're gonna put project-based learning with experiential learning, and it's really one of the things that we love about Flat World Languages, and one of the reasons that we were really advocating for Reporteros. We got to have a book adoption semi-recently, and we got to see what our original text had to offer and what these new texts had to offer. And when we were going through Reporteros, there were 2 things that were really standing out to us. We loved all of the cultural context with the cultural comparisons built in starting in level 1, but also that it was project-based learning at its finest. So we're going to see some of those things coming up. So we want to know what the difference between experiential learning and project-based learning is. Project-based learning emphasizes the completion of an extended project that addresses real-world problems. So it's really engaging and it is worthwhile, but it's only one component of experiential learning. So it is experiential learning, but experiential learning also can include things like simulations, role plays, any other kind of immersive cultural experience.
Right.
Or educational experience.
Yeah. And then there's this combined approach, right? Which is what we're doing in our world language classrooms and why we're so thrilled to have Reporteros by KWL in our classrooms this year. So by combining this project-based learning and experiential learning, right, they have the opportunity to develop all of these skills, including listening, reading, writing, speaking, both in controlled classroom settings, but in also authentic cultural environments, right? And so it just is the best of both worlds here. We have a couple of examples from the things that you guys have seen today and how they marry so well with what Reporteros has offered us this school year.
I won't read the whole screen for you. You can see it, but we tried to get a snapshot, a screenshot of a mini project offered in Reporteros. This one is actually from Reporteros Trace, but you can see what the textbook is having, and then also some activities or experiences that we talked about, and everything is kind of married together, as Caroline said, and it makes a really fun but organized experience for your students. And it's really what we love. They're inspired by real world scenarios, and we really loved how the program offers this authentic and engaging content. They're building it along the entire way, and it starts to awaken the students' curiosity about the Spanish-speaking world. And it's perfectly aligned with all of those actual instructional approaches and the core practices that we talked about before.
Someone noted that they saw only a blank screen. So I was wondering if anyone else was seeing a blank screen. Can you see my screen? Aubrey?
I can see it.
All right.
It might take a while to load for some people because we've got like a fancy arrow going. Sometimes that's not, we didn't realize until now that it's not friendly.
Yeah, yeah.
We can keep on going. I know I do want you to have some time to ask questions, but if you want to look through here, here's another experience, Una Casa Perfecta. This is what I do with my level 2s. Reporteros has a beautiful project that the students can do, and they have to actually pretend to be the real estate agent. And then one of the things that I did to kick it up a notch was I had my students, instead of just drawing floor plans, they actually used interior design websites. And so they had to do an entire room, but we also explored those in Spanish. So they were not allowed to use the English version. We did it in Spanish. So they were picking out ventanas. They were learning about all the different things and the vocabulary words as they were placing them. So that is how I did get some students that said, this is what I want to do. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. This example comes to us from Reporteros 3. It's another great example of how we marry the two. So we talked about the lonche de libros. Well, then we have nuestros libros favoritos, right? So we're looking at our favorite books. Well, our kids got to pick some of their favorite books. So you're giving that experience to them. It's all about our main goal being that you can take these beautiful ideas and projects that are presented by KWL and you can expand them, right, to include meaningful learning experiences that enrich the products that students are eventually going to create. Here, the Proyecto Final aligned so great in this Reporteros 3 book with this idea of the Latin American Book Awards and presenting Latin American Book Awards in our classes. And so this experience, this authentic experience, will this year help my kids do this Proyecto Final that is presented in Reporteros 3. And again, just with identity, we're looking at heritage and identity. It's connecting directly to the project-based learning that KWL is putting forward in their books. We're leveraging experiential learning. We're leveraging input to maximize project-based learning output. And again, just the Earth Day poster, this couldn't have aligned more with what I've done previously with my kiddos, having them make that meaningful infographic after Earth Day, and then just sharing it with the community to make it an experience of a lifetime here. So love the alignment between KWL and what we do as experiential learning, or using experiential learning in our classes. It's not a methodology, right? It is a methodology, but it's one of many tools that you can use in your classes: experiential learning, project-based learning, comprehensible input, all of those things. They're really important. There is no one right way.
So let's go for the questions we have. The first one is if you get any pushback in your community regarding the Dia de los Muertos.
I have not received pushback in reference to Dia de los Muertos, but I am very transparent with the community before I begin teaching it. So we talk about it in class, and I do email my parents to let them know exactly what it is. So I'll give them a little outline of the things that we're going to learn and what we're going to appreciate about it. And then I'll also, if I have some good sources, send them the links so that they can feel comfortable with it and understand what it is and that it's not, worshiping dead. That is the only question I had once from a student. They said they weren't sure if it would go with their religion. And they came out and asked me, are we worshiping like a person, or how does that work? And I think that's really great if your families and your students feel comfortable enough to approach you and ask those questions, to have those conversations. But ever since having that happen years ago, I was like, okay, well, I want to just involve everybody from the get-go. So with Dia de los Muertos, I do send a little informational message home, but I also invite the families then, if there's something that they would like to contribute, or if they have a photo of a loved one that has passed away that they would like us to remember during this time, that they can bring that. And then those are the photos that go up on our ofrenda. So I think that makes it more meaningful. And then they understand it's not like we just have a picture of a celebrity with candles, and then that's where the misconception comes. They actually understand, what this day or this celebration is about and who we are remembering and why, and then they get the chance to remember their loved ones as well and keep their memories alive and present.
Oftentimes, I have not gotten pushback from Dia de los Muertos, but I have gotten pushback on other things. And I think one of the things that's important is transparency is critical in ensuring, right? So when not that anybody is ignorant, right? But if you don't know, you don't know. And so we need to break down that barrier for the people in our community. It's part of our job as world language teachers to help create global citizens, at the same time providing information to our students that they can then go out and share, so there aren't these misconceptions in our world of what is happening. And so I think it's a powerful approach to be transparent with our parents and our community about what it is that we're doing in our classrooms. I will always, as Aubrey said, you can come into my classroom. My door is open all the time. You could pop in. Yes, I have to know when you're coming technically, but like it wouldn't matter to me if you popped in 5 minutes. And I think that's really important to have that open door policy in your classroom, and with transparency with what it is that you're teaching kids.
Perfect, thank you. Then the next question is a bit random, off topic, the person said, which is, how do you arrange your seatings for younger students, especially 4th and 5th?
So my lowest level, I don't know, lowest age group, I don't know how to word this, was middle school. So 6th grade is the youngest end of my teaching experience, my students. I do know in the middle school, I had fun making my classroom face each other. So I had my students, you can either group them, like have 2 or 3 desks together and make a row and then a second row of that, or you can have them by themselves, single file desks, but still 2 or 3 ways, 2 or 3 rows facing one direction. And then I had 2 or 3 rows facing in the other direction so that we're face to face and there's this open aisle. It made it really great so that they could pay attention to me or whoever was supposed to be the center of attention or whatever we were looking at. I could put that in the middle. You can walk up and down and be close to whoever you need to be close to. Easy to redirect students. Also, you didn't have to move all the time to work with different people. It was very simple to say, okay, you're going to work with the person behind you, to your left, to your right, or look straight across. Who are you making eye contact with? That's your partner. But I think that it's controlled, but you're making it so it's still set up for a lot of communication.
I think too, when you're grouping students, I think it depends on what you're grouping them for. There are a lot of times when I want my students if I want them to create a video, I want them to be with someone that they're comfortable with if they're doing videos. Whereas if I'm grouping so that kids can work on skill building and tasks, I'm going to use whatever formative data I've collected to purposefully put kids in groups, whether it's skill level A, skill level B, and skill level C together, or if it's one of each in your group. I think it just depends on truly what you're doing. I like Aubrey, have only taught the lowest grade that I taught was also 6th, those 6th through 8th. And making those decisions in 6th grade is much different than making those decisions with my high school seniors. But the important part is that you're making decisions that will set kids up so that the outcome is what you want it to be, that you can cater to their strengths as a teacher, that you can help them bounce ideas off of each other, or you can provide more meaningful input to maybe a group of struggling learners on one side of the room, 4 corners. Aubrey was mentioning the way that her structural room was set up. If y'all are like me, I have 32 desks in my room. Every single one is full, and grouping sometimes is really challenging. But I think make best with what you are doing. And I'm sure, you're using formative assessment data to make groups. I'm sure sometimes, I'm not going to lie, there are some times where it's these 3 kids and these 3 kids and y'all are just working together because that's how it shakes out sometimes. But I don't have any advice for 4th and 5th grade because I've truly never been there.
I think important to me would just be that no one's back was to the board or another area of the classroom that you frequent most often. So just make sure everybody has a good sight line. But I do think, I don't know, that was my best idea for my 4th and 5th grade classroom, and it was based on my 6th and 7th grade classroom. So I hope that helps.
I'm sure it does. Thank you. And then let's go to the last question we have, which is if code.org has some restrictions of copyright if the person decides to upload some content from other programs or books.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't fully understand the question here. Upload content from other programs or books, like other coding.
It's not stated here, but we can suppose that might be the case.
If you check out code.org, I think Caroline and I both have only used things that were offered by code.org, and that's how we structured our lessons, and that's the coding that our students were involved in, and then they were allowed to. Oh, I see somebody said photos and videos. Are you asking like if you can download them? I think I just have to say, I honestly don't know. This is something that I would have to explore. I don't know 100%. I understand the question, but I certainly also don't want to say the wrong thing and get anybody or myself in trouble. So to be explored.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I did put the link to code.org in the chat. And I also know you do not have to pay for code.org. It is free. That is the beauty of code.org. It is free. But I do not know the answer to that question. They have materials you can download. They have lesson plans that you can download. If you want to alter their lesson plans, I imagine that would be something that is okay. I mean, they're PDF downloadable, but again, I don't want to speak for code.org, just like Aubrey mentioned.
Of course, no problem at all. So yes, that was the last question we had. So again, thank you very much for both of you for being here with us and for this really insightful and helpful webinar. And thank you all for being here as well. Again, if you have any questions that remains or if you need to ask anything to us as well, you can write us to marketing@clet with wl.com. You can also go to our website and get a free sample of Reporteros in case you want to see more about this project-based learning. And we're here for you if you have any questions. We hope you all have a nice evening.
Thank you so much. We had so much fun. We hope you guys had an equally good time.